Spoiler warning for anybody that's not interested in Greek mythology or familiar with the Odyssey or haven't watched the movie yet, do not continue watching this video. With that being said, quick question. If you had to spend 20 years trying to get home, what's the first thing that you would think about? What's the first thing you'd miss? Let me know. Anyways, imagine fighting a war that lasts 10 years. Then you finally get to go home, but the journey lasts another 10 years. Along the way, you get trapped in a cave with a one-eyed giant freak, not Giannis, sail past a six-headed monster that destroys anything it touches, resist the most beautiful singing known to man, travel to literal hell, and somehow make it home just to find your house has over 100 men trying to bang and throw a ring on your wife. Couldn't be me. I can't swim, so I'll never be in that situation. A guy like me would never. If you just watched Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey, you probably walked away thinking, wow, that Odysseus guy had a rough 20 years. Or maybe you said, is this based on a true story? To your husband, like a lady did at my very own theater. What are we feeding these people? Either way, the movie is just the tip of the iceberg that sank the ship. Wrong movie. The original poem written by Homer, not that Homer, nearly 2,800 years ago, is one of the greatest adventure stories ever told. And there are some incredible moments, characters, and twists that either had to be shortened, changed, or left out entirely for the movie. Today, let's look at some of the biggest differences and craziest moments from the original Odyssey and do a little learning, shall we? First, what actually is the Odyssey? Most people know about the Trojan horse, but that isn't actually the focus of the Odyssey. The Odyssey is about what happened after the war, following the Greek hero Odysseus as he desperately tries to return home to his wife Penelope and his son Telemachus. Simple in concept, but boy is the journey anything but. Speaking of journeys, neither Homer nor Nolan even start at the beginning of the story. The first change in the movie is where the story begins. In Nolan's project, the story is way more linear, whereas in Homer's work, it starts much later. In Homer's poem, Odysseus had already survived almost everything. He's shipwrecked and washes onto the island of the Phaeacians. Sorry if I mispronounced that. Never learned how to pronounce it. I probably should have looked it up before this video. It's the first video. Cut a guy some slack, eh? Only after they're curious about who this stranger is, does Odysseus begin telling the story of everything that's happened to him. So some of the most famous moments, the Cyclops, Circe, the Sirens, Scylla, and Charybdis, are actually one gigantic flashback. It's a very modern storytelling technique that I personally don't like, but both the movie and the poem do sort of the same thing. The movie just does it with Calypso and leaves out the, again, Phaeacians. Sorry to y'all. Completely. Who, fun fact, actually help get him home, and Poseidon punishes them by turning their returning ship into stone. That guy has some issues that we will talk about later. Speaking of issues, let's talk about the beings that caused about 90% of them. The gods. The next change, and I consider this a big one, is that the gods are much different. In most modern adaptations, they typically reduce the role of what could arguably be the coolest characters, the gods. Side note, I think this is one of the reasons Rick Riordan is the greatest author of all time and Percy Jackson is unmatched, but I digress. In Homer's poem, Athena is basically Odysseus' biggest supporter. She disguises people, gives advice, inspires courage, and she even changes her appearance, like Arya in that one episode, and then she never uses the sick, awesome superpower she spent half the story learning ever again. Don't let me get carried away. Poseidon also absolutely despises Odysseus, not because of Troy, but because he blinded his poor old son Polyphemus, aka the Cyclops. Almost every disaster Odysseus experiences can somehow be traced back to Poseidon refusing to let him go home. This, kids, is called divine intervention. In Nolan's adaptation, Athena is portrayed as an innocent girl who lost her life in the Trojan War, right in front of Odysseus. She's seen as more of his guilt or conscience, and less as a godly figure. You also unfortunately never see Poseidon or Zeus in any of the other frames. This, kids, is called a tragedy, or maybe I'm just brainwashed by Rick. Either way, it's kind of stinky. Remember that Polyphemus fella I spoke of like 30 seconds ago? Odysseus might have made his dumbest decision ever during that encounter. Odysseus and them get stuck in a cave with Polyphemus, and after blinding the Cyclops, Odysseus successfully escapes by tying themselves under his sheep as he lets them out to graze. I win! Odysseus, probably. Instead of taking the humble route, Odysseus starts talking mad trash. Not really. He just screams his name across the sea to let Polyphemus pray to his father, Poseidon, for revenge. But he literally docks himself. He leaked his IP and password just because. It's one of Homer's greatest examples of a tragic flaw. Odysseus isn't perfect, he's incredibly clever, but sometimes his own pride becomes his worst enemy. He's just like me, for real. Another reason this story has survived for so long is because of a joke. Homer was a jokester, you see. When Polyphemus asks Odysseus his name, Odysseus replies, "My name is nobody." I don't know why. Later, after being blinded, Polyphemus screams for help, as one does when a small man stabs you in the eye. The other Cyclopes, rush over and ask, "Who's hurting you?" He replies, "Nobody!" So naturally, they assume Buddy is tripping and they leave. The oldest trick in the poem, as they say. In Nolan's adaptation, it's essentially this exact passage, but the classic nobody joke is missing, and if I remember correctly, Odysseus shoots Polyphemus with an arrow instead of taunting him, like from the poem. There's also only Polyphemus and no other Cyclops to be seen in the movie. Cyclopes, whatever. Not a huge change, but a change nonetheless. Also, I love the scene personally. It's pretty much exactly as I imagined it. Escaping a giant one-eyed monster would have been enough adventure for me, but our pal Homer was just getting in his Duffy. The underworld. One of the coolest sections of the Odyssey is when Odysseus travels into the land of the dead looking for knowledge. The blind prophet Tiresias, old man, tells him what he must do if he ever wants to see his home again, but that's not all. Odysseus also meets his own mom who died while he was away. He meets Achilles, one of the greatest warriors ever put on a piece of paper, also in the movie Troy, if you haven't watched that. Achilles tells him he'd rather be a poor servant alive than rule over every dead hero. Even the greatest warrior who ever lived realizes glory isn't worth dying for. The movie shows Odysseus talking to the dead and getting his prophecy from the blind prophet, but he doesn't interact with his mother nor Achilles. Instead, he interacts with Sinon, his cousin who fell in battle, and the king Agamemnon. Sick helmet, by the way. I wish he would have interacted with Achilles, but it is what it is. We don't get to see him fight, so I guess it's not that big of a deal that we don't get to hear him talk. The changes were good for the adaptation because both Sinon and Agamemnon were both characters we cared about as viewers, so it's cool with me. Not so cool for Odysseus though. Surviving the underworld didn't mean he was anywhere close to home. Calypso and the Lotus Eaters. One of the biggest differences between the original poem and this adaptation is how Odysseus' time with Calypso is portrayed. In Homer's version, Odysseus gets offered immortality if he stays with her, but he really just wants to go home. Allegedly. In Nolan's version, Odysseus is being fed lotus flowers by Calypso, which doesn't happen in Homer's version. Him and his crew do receive lotus flowers, but they come from the Lotus Eaters. The lotus flowers make you want to stay forever, and Odysseus physically had to drag his men back to the ship. Back to Calypso. She's actually trying to help Odysseus remember why he's stranded on her island, and she's again at the same time feeding him lotus flowers. What kind of weird stuff is this on? Me personally, I would have liked to see the portrayal of the Lotus Eaters and what that would have been like, because the only media I've seen them in is at the casino scene in the Percy Jackson movie. My love for PJ never wavers. One crazy hag to the next. Circe. Circe is another character whose role is often shortened in adaptations, with Nolan's being no exception. In the original poem, she doesn't just turn Odysseus' men into pigs, best scene in the movie in my opinion, and then that altercation gets dissolved the same day. No. Odysseus actually stays with her for an entire year. Some stories, they become lovers, but they actually don't in Odysseus' poem, so I don't know where that comes from. Anyways, she's more of a complicated figure who delays his journey while also helping him in the exact same way she does in the movie. She turns his crew back and tells him to go to the underworld. Eventually, after about 20 years, Odysseus finally makes it home. The ending. The Odyssey is remembered as an adventure, but the ending reminds you this story comes from a brutal ancient world. Odysseus returns, defeats the suitors, and justice is served, but it doesn't end with them sailing away on a ship chasing the sun in exile. No. Those dead suitors had families, and those families wanted revenge. Violence is about to continue until Athena intervenes and peace is finally restored. I actually quite like the ending of Nolan's adaptation. Both are good, but Nolan gets to put his superhero, good guy, good ending twist on it. It's nice. Throughout all of the movie, Odysseus is portrayed as sort of a war vet with traumatic PTSD instead of the most clever Greek hero in all of mythology. I don't hate the change because it makes the movie different, and the other characters do talk about him as the most intelligent and strategic and clever man they've ever met. It's just a change, which is what this video is about, and that's what I think makes the Odyssey so timeless. The Odyssey isn't really about monsters or gods or magical islands and mythical creatures. It's about perseverance, resisting temptation, using intelligence, longing for home, and it's about how a person changes after 20 years of war, loss, and impossible choices. That's why we are still adapting it nearly 3,000 years later. Every generation tells a story a little differently, but the heart of it remains the same. Nolan saw a broken war veteran trying to find peace. Homer saw the cleverest man alive trying to find home. Neither version is wrong. They're just telling different stories about the same man. Anyways, I hope you guys learned something from this video, and if you stuck around for this long, I hope I earned your like, and please subscribe to help me grow the channel. This will hopefully be the first of many videos I upload on this channel, and my goal with this is to talk about things that I find interesting, like mythology, mysteries, crimes, all kinds of stuff, and I hope you guys find them interesting too. Until next time, watch your step. You never know when you'll fall into the time pit.